Imagine walking along Manhattan, New York in the morning, going about your day, and in a blink of an eye, you're witnessing one of the country's greatest modern tragedies. Have you ever wondered about the roots, the details, and the aftermath of 9/11? Join us as we tackle the events surrounding the tragedy in this gripping documentary. Welcome back to Eventful Insights, and today we're talking about a piece of modern history, because we're unfolding the occurrences before, during, and after the devastation that happened on September 11th, 2001. Today, we get to explore the question, why did the 9/11 attacks happen? But before we begin, we want to see how you know about the tragedies that happened that day. Was it something you read in a history book, or did you see it happen in the news in real time? Leave your insights down in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Now let's begin. On September 11th, 2001, terrorists from the extremist group Al-Qaeda took control of 4 passenger planes and used them to attack targets in the United States. Nearly 3,000 people died in these attacks, including the 19 terrorists. The events of that day were broadcast worldwide, shocking and horrifying people all around the globe. As a result, President George W. Bush's administration declared a war on terrorism, which included creating the Department of Homeland Security and starting a war in Afghanistan. If you want to know more about the war on terror and the invasion of Afghanistan, visit our channel. We have a whole video dedicated to exploring its events. Now, like every piece of history, it is important to know the context behind this. Why did Al-Qaeda attack in the first place? Who was behind all this? What was the plan? We'll soon find out here. Maybe to many Americans, 9/11 looked like a random act of terror, but it had been building up for years. Several factors coming together in the late 1990s led to the attack. These included problems in the Middle East that motivated the attackers and mistakes in US intelligence that made the country exposed. Let's explore some of these factors, shall we? Islamic extremism grew due to events like the Iranian Revolution, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and the killing of Egypt's president. This extremism turned against the US because of its support for Israel and oppressive Arab governments. High birth rates and few job opportunities created social stress. Extremists turned to violence because they saw no way to achieve peaceful change. The spread of weapons gave them the tools to cause harm, and advances in communication helped them publicize their actions globally, which aimed to scare people in the West. After fighting against the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan in the 1980s, Osama bin Laden, a nationalist from Saudi Arabia, founded Al-Qaeda, an organization of unconventional troops. Bin Laden thought that US troops being in Saudi Arabia during the Gulf War in 1990 to 1991 violated the holy areas near Mecca and Medina. In 1996, he basically declared war on the United States. Even while he was becoming more popular and acquiring supporters in the Middle East in the 1990s, he was not well known in the United States prior to 9/11. In 1988, he helped start Al-Qaeda, the militant Islamic terrorist group that planned and carried out the 9/11 attacks. Bin Laden urged the killing of all Americans, claiming they were the worst thieves in the world today. The main planner of the September 11th attacks was Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He joined the Muslim Brotherhood when he was 16 and later went to the United States for college, graduating from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University in 1986. After college, he went to Pakistan and Afghanistan to fight against the Soviet Union. A journalist who talked to him in 2002 said Khalid Sheikh Mohammed wanted to explode about 12 American planes in Asia in the mid-1990s. This plan, called Bojinka, didn't work out, but Mohammed didn't give up on his idea. The journalist thought that by teaming up with bin Laden, Mohammed believed he could finally make his dream into a reality. He met bin Laden in Afghanistan in 1996. The 9/11 Commission, which was formed in 2002 to investigate the 2001 attacks, explained that it was during this meeting that Mohammed proposed a plan. He suggested training pilots to crash planes into buildings in the United States. Mohammed came up with the idea of using hijacked planes to attack the US, while Al-Qaeda provided the people, money and support needed for the operation. Bin Laden connected the attacks in New York and Washington to a bigger plan of attacking the United States to change governments in the Middle East. The September 11th plan showed that Al-Qaeda was a worldwide organization. The plan involved meetings in Malaysia, people learning to fly planes in the US, leaders based in Germany organizing some parts of the plot, money moving from Dubai, and suicide attackers being recruited from Middle Eastern countries. All of this was controlled by Al-Qaeda leaders in Afghanistan. In 1999, lead hijacker Mohammed Atta and the others from Hamburg, Germany went to Afghanistan, just when the September 11th plan was starting. Bin Laden and his commander saw that Atta and his group, who were educated in the West, were better suited for the attacks on Washington and New York than the people they had already recruited. So, Bin Laden chose Atta to lead the operation. Through emails, Atta informed one of their key planners, Ramzi bin al-Shib, about the plan's development while he was in the United States. Atta used simple words to inform bin al-Shib that they were almost ready for the attacks, all the while disguising what they were doing in the emails as if they were conversations with his girlfriend, Jenny. On August 29, 2001, early in the morning, Atta called bin al-Shib and said, "2 sticks, a dash and a cake with a stick down. What is it?" After some thought, bin al-Shib understood that Atta meant for the assaults to occur in 2 weeks. 2 sticks, representing 11, and a cake with a stick down, representing 9. So it implied that the attacks will take place on the 11th of September. He then left Germany for Pakistan on September 5th. He informed bin Laden of the locations and timing of the assaults by sending a message to Afghanistan from there. Now, with the plan formed and important people in the loop, it was time for them to strike, and it all went down on the planned date, September 11th, 2001. The 19 terrorists had gotten box cutters and knives past security at 3 East Coast airports: Logan International Airport in Boston, Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C., and Newark International Airport in New Jersey. They got on 4 flights heading to California early in the morning because those planes had plenty of fuel for the long trip across the country. Shortly after takeoff, the terrorists took over the planes and flew them into targets. At 8:45 a.m. on a seemingly regular Tuesday morning, an American Airlines plane full of jet fuel crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. The crash made a huge, burning hole near the 80th floor, killing many people instantly and trapping many others on higher floors. As people started to evacuate the towers, TV cameras showed what seemed like a strange accident. But then, 18 minutes later, another plane, United Airlines Flight 175, came out of nowhere, turned sharply towards the World Trade Center and hit the South Tower near the 60th floor. Some office workers couldn't escape and jumped from the buildings to avoid the fires. The crash caused a huge explosion, throwing burning pieces onto nearby buildings and streets. While many people were focused on what was happening in New York, at 9:45 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 flew over downtown Washington, D.C. before crashing into the west side of the Pentagon military headquarters. The plane's fuel caused a huge fire that made part of the building collapse. In total, 125 military workers and civilians died in the Pentagon, along with all 64 people on the plane. Around the same time, a 4th plane heading to California, United Flight 93, was taken over by hijackers about 40 minutes after leaving Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. Because the plane was late taking off, passengers found out about what was happening in New York and Washington through calls on cell phones and airphones to people on the ground. Realizing the plane wasn't going back to an airport, a group of passengers and flight attendants made a plan to fight back. A few of the brave passengers managed to contact loved ones before attacking the hijackers. Thomas Burnett Jr. told his wife on the phone that he was aware that they were all going to die, but they were determined to do something about it, bidding her a farewell with an "I love you." Another was a flight attendant named Sandy Bradshaw, who called her husband to say that she was filling pitchers with boiling water, presumably for the attack. The passengers fought the four hijackers, possibly using a fire extinguisher to try to get into the cockpit. The plane then turned upside down and went down fast, crashing in a rural field near Shanksville in western Pennsylvania at 10:10 a.m. Everyone on board, 44 people, died. It's not clear where the hijackers were planning to hit, but ideas include the White House, the U.S. Capitol, the Camp David retreat, or some nuclear power plants along the East Coast. Less than 15 minutes after the terrorists attacked the main U.S. military center, things got even worse in New York when the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed in a big cloud of dust and smoke. The steel that held the building together couldn't handle the extreme heat from the burning fuel. At 10:30 a.m., the North Tower also fell down. People who worked there and lived nearby ran in fear, trying to get away from the big clouds of dust and debris. Some nearby buildings got badly damaged, and a few fell down later. The fires at the World Trade Center burned for more than 3 months. Only 18 people who were in the towers when they fell survived. Most were firefighters in the North Tower's stairwell B, which didn't break. One woman survived, even though the stairs she was running down fell apart. Nearly 10,000 people got hurt, with many of them badly wounded. Rescue efforts started right away as the nation and the world tried to understand how many people had been lost. Almost 3,000 people died. About 2,750 in New York, 184 at the Pentagon, and 40 in Pennsylvania. All 19 terrorists also died. In New York City, over 400 police officers and firefighters were among the victims. They bravely went to help at the towers and never came back. It was supposed to be a pleasant morning for President Bush, as he was in an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida. The president was reading to the students when he heard that a plane hit the World Trade Center. His chief of staff, Andrew Card, whispered in his ear that a second plane hit the second tower and America was under attack. To keep him safe, Bush flew across the country on Air Force One and landed in Washington, D.C. that evening. Later that same night, Bush spoke to the nation from the Oval Office. He declared, "We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them." As a result of the 9/11 attacks, President Bush started a worldwide war on terror to stop terrorists before they strike again. From a bird's-eye view, the hijacking may seem like a random act of terrorism. But upon closer look, it's way more complex and heartbreaking, with a motive rooted in years before and thousands of people losing loved ones. Now, with a potential deeper understanding of the events, we'd like to know what you felt upon knowing all of this. What kind of thoughts are running through your head right now? Leave a comment down below. Also, if you're interested in more videos like this, feel free to visit our channel. Going back to when President Bush declared a global war against terrorism, let's explore how the world came together in the midst of a dark time. After the September 11th attacks, many countries that were friends with the United States came together in support. This was shown when the French newspaper Le Monde had a headline that said, "We are all Americans now." Even in Iran, thousands gathered for a candlelight vigil in the capital. The evidence collected by the United States quickly convinced most governments that the Islamic militant group called Al-Qaeda was behind the attacks. This group had been involved in earlier attacks against Americans, and its leader bin Laden had made many anti-American statements. Al-Qaeda was based in Afghanistan and had a strong connection with the Taliban, the group ruling Afghanistan at that time. The Taliban refused to give up bin Laden or stop Al-Qaeda's activities, despite the US demanding them to. Operation Enduring Freedom started on October 7th. It was led by the United States and aimed to remove the Taliban government in Afghanistan and destroy Osama bin Laden's terrorist group there. In just 2 months, US forces had mostly taken out the Taliban from power. But the fighting continued as US and other countries' forces tried to beat a Taliban rebellion happening in nearby Pakistan. For the first time ever, NATO used Article 5, letting its members defend themselves collectively. On October 7th, the US and its allies attacked Afghanistan. In a few months, thousands of militants were killed or caught, and Taliban and Al-Qaeda leaders went into hiding. The US also worked hard to find other Al-Qaeda members worldwide, making fighting terrorism the main focus of its foreign policy. Meanwhile, security in the US was increased a lot, especially at places like airports, government buildings, and sports arenas. To help with this, Congress quickly passed the USA Patriot Act, temporarily giving the FBI and other law enforcement more power to search and watch people. Later on, the government created the Department of Homeland Security. Even though the September 11th attacks caused a lot of damage and loss of life, they did not work out well for Al-Qaeda in the end. After the incident, Al-Qaeda lost its main base in Afghanistan. Later, some of its leaders, even those who did not agree with the attacks at first, tried to make it seem like the Western intervention in Afghanistan was a win for Al-Qaeda. One of the group's military leaders said in an interview 4 years later that the attacks in New York and Washington were part of a big plan to make the United States take wrong actions. Additionally, bin Laden made a big mistake in guessing how the US would react to the September 11th attacks. He thought the US might leave the Middle East, like they did in Somalia in 1993, or they might just do some weak missile attacks, like after the bombings in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. But neither of these things happened. Instead, the US attacked the Taliban with careful strikes from their planes, along with help from many Northern Alliance fighters and over 300 US Special Forces on the ground, plus 110 CIA officers. 2 months after September 11th, the Taliban lost to the Northern Alliance and the US, but this was just the start of the longest war in US history as they tried to stop the Taliban and Al-Qaeda from coming back. Speaking of the war, wasting no time at all, in September 2001, President Bush declared he wanted Osama bin Laden caught, dead or alive. A reward of $25 million was offered for any information leading to his capture or killing. But bin Laden avoided capture, even in December 2001, when US forces found him in the mountains of Tora Bora in Afghanistan. After that, nobody knew where he was until US intelligence found him in Pakistan, living in Abbottabad. On May 2, 2011, in the early morning, on orders from President Barack Obama, a small team of US Navy SEALs attacked his hideout and ended him. Not long later, President Obama announced bin Laden's death on television while speaking from the White House. People cheered upon hearing the news outside the White House, in Times Square, New York City, and at Ground Zero, the place where the towers once stood. He declared, "Justice has been served." After that, evidence gathered from the raid was used to determine that bin Laden was planning on killing President Obama and carrying out other strikes against the United States, possibly on the anniversary of 9/11. It seemed that the US government was working like a machine to unfold the events leading up to 9/11. As matters started to unravel, one of their crucial mistakes came to light. It was in 2002 when President Bush chose a group to investigate the September 11th attacks, and 2 years later they finished their report. Upon investigation, they found that the CIA's main mistake before September 11th was not putting 2 suspected Al-Qaeda militants, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, on the State Department's watch list. These 2 men were trained by Al-Qaeda to keep the passengers on the plane under their control. The CIA had been watching Hazmi and Mihdar since they went to a terrorist meeting in Malaysia on January 5, 2000. Not putting them on the watch list meant they could easily enter the US using their real names. 10 days after the meeting in Malaysia, Hazmi and Mihdar flew to Los Angeles. The CIA also didn't tell the FBI about the suspected terrorists' identities, which could have helped the FBI find them once they were in the US. The commission found this wasn't just a few CIA employees' fault, but many. About 50 to 60 CIA workers read messages about the two Al-Qaeda suspects, but did not do anything. Some of these officers knew that one of the suspects had a visa for the US, and by May 2001, some knew that the other had flown to Los Angeles. If law enforcement knew their names, finding them in California wouldn't have been hard. They rented a place, got driver's licenses, opened bank accounts, bought a car, and took flying lessons at a local school under their real names. Mihdar even put his name in the local phone book. The two suspects weren't placed on a watch list or had their names disclosed to the FBI until August 24, 2001, when a CIA officer at the FBI started to ask questions. But all the FBI did was send a routine message requesting that Mihdar undergo investigation. A few weeks later, two of the hijackers on the American Airlines plane that crashed into the Pentagon were Hazmi and Mihdar. And after such a large-scale assault on a nation, there are bound to have lasting effects. Emotionally, the attacks caused a lot of pain and distress for many. Hundreds of thousands of individuals directly witnessed the attacks, while millions more observed the unfolding tragedy through live television broadcasts. After September 11th, the media kept showing the attacks and people gathering at Ground Zero. Some citizens came with pictures of their missing family, hoping for news about them. Physically, countless firefighters, police officers, and others working and living near Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan were exposed to harmful fumes and dust from the collapsing towers. Approximately 10,000 people had cancer diagnosis connected to the 9/11 events by 2018. More than $7 billion was donated to the families of the injured and victims between 2001 and 2004. On January 2, 2011, President Barack Obama signed the James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act into law. The law, named in honor of James Zadroga, a police officer who died of a respiratory ailment while assisting at Ground Zero, offered survivors and first responders medical treatment and compensation. The Victim Compensation Fund was supposed to stop accepting claims in December 2020, but on July 29, 2019, President Donald Trump signed a law extending support for victims through 2092, as benefits had been reduced due to fund depletion. Economically, the attacks severely affected global financial markets. Since the World Trade Center was in the center of New York's financial area, damage to Lower Manhattan's infrastructure, along with concerns about stock market chaos, led to the closure of New York markets for 4 days. Following its reopening, markets suffered large losses. Additionally, a lot of people were left stranded across the country as a result of the attacks, since commercial flights were suspended until September 13th, and it took a few more days for regular services to restart under tighter security procedures. In memory of the lives lost due to the tragic event, Congress decided to proclaim September 11, 2001 as Patriot Day in remembrance of the 9/11 attacks on December 18, 2001. Then September 11th was declared a National Day of Service and Remembrance by Congress in 2009. Following the assaults, people placed flowers at American embassies across the globe and conducted candlelight vigils. From Buckingham Palace in the United Kingdom, Queen Elizabeth performed the U.S. national anthem. Rio de Janeiro put up billboards that embraced the New York City skyline, featuring the Christ the Redeemer statue. 2 brilliant columns of light rose from the site of the Twin Towers on the first anniversary in 2002. This tribute in light has been happening every year since then. To choose a worthy and permanent memorial to the 9/11 victims, a competition known as the World Trade Center Site Memorial Competition was launched. The winning design features 2 pools with waterfalls where the Twin Towers once stood. The names of all 2,983 victims are engraved on bronze panels surrounding them. This was named Reflecting Absence by Michael Arad. The site opened on September 11, 2011, marking the 10-year anniversary. Then came the National September 11th Memorial and Museum in May 2014, followed by the Freedom Tower opening in November 2014, all at the original World Trade Center site. And there you have it. One sunny Tuesday morning suddenly became a great tragedy. After watching the video, what are your thoughts on 9/11 and the events that happened right after it? Let us know in the comments down below. Thanks for making it to the end of the video. While you're still here, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Ring that notification bell while you're at it. And we hope to see you soon in our next upload. Thanks for watching.